It is something of a victory lap to be here in Melbourne and see the exhibition, which is opening. I guess today is actually the first day. As some of you may know, it did begin in San Francisco and traveled to the Museum of Modern Art in New York and was seen in Paris, Vienna, Moscow, Jerusalem, and now in Melbourne. It struck me in seeing it in the last couple of days as it was being completed that the exhibition takes on a different meaning here at Acme, where, of course, you're dedicated to moving images. And the exhibition thus far has been seen in more straightforward museums, whether great museums like the Albertina in Vienna or the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, or modern museums like MoMA and SFMOMA. It takes on a different kind of meaning because, of course, William's work is very much about bringing those really marvelous charcoal drawings to life, and that's I think a very special aspect of the show that you'll see here. What I would like to do is really not talk about William at all, or only slightly, and see if I can get this right. Okay. What I'd like to do is talk a bit about SFMOMA. Because we are at such a kind of wonderful and interesting and captivating and challenging moment in our history. And I thought before I leap into the future, I'd take a look back for a moment and just give you a bit of a context for SFMOMA, for those of you who don't know the museum, not been to San Francisco. In fact, the museum was founded in 1935. It's one of the three oldest museums dedicated to modern contemporary art in the United States. The two older being the Museum of Modern Art, which was founded in 1929, and the Whitney Museum in New York, 1933. And so I'm showing you this wonderful vintage photograph. You can tell, obviously, by the cars, the vintage of the cars there. This is 1935. The museum was, in a sense, hidden away in the Veterans Building, the Civic Center, in the third and fourth floor of the building. A beautiful old building, but it was never designed for art at all. And if any of you were ever in that building, we were there from 1935 to 1994. And the museum was on the third and fourth floors, and you took two very small elevators up to those floors. There was a little tiny coffee bar, a very small bookstore. The galleries were principally in hallways, in fact. It was a kind of inauspicious beginning in a certain sense. So what happened was the museum moved in 1995 to this building, this location. This is another part of town called SOMA, south of the market area. At that time, a rather rundown neighborhood of warehouses and parking lots, and actually a lot of artists had their studios here. Bruce Nauman had his studio, in fact, as a young man not too far from here. They commissioned Mario Botta to design this building, and it gave the museum exactly what it needed at that time. We had been secluded away for decades with very little or no street presence in that Veterans Building that I showed you earlier, and there was no presence. There was no brand for the museum. It had no visibility. There are things about this building by Mario Botta that I like very much. It has very, very beautiful galleries, beautiful daylit spaces. Some of the artists who have had exhibitions in the museum, especially painters, have said that their work has never looked better than it has in our galleries because of the natural light and the good proportions that Botta gave us. But there are things about the building that I don't like, quite frankly. And one of them is exactly what was good about it when it was built in 1995. It gave the museum this rather muscular presence, this very strong, iconic facade, very, very strong and memorable. But it's not very welcoming. It doesn't, as you look at it here, there's nothing that says this is an art museum. There's nothing really that says, please come in. We care about you. We've got great art and we want to share it with you. It's a kind of heaviness about it. It's more of a Romanesque cathedral, if I can put it that way. It's more of a reliquary, and it says we've got great art in here, and we'll let you in on our terms. It doesn't speak of generosity. Now, I discovered this. I wasn't smart enough to think of this myself, but I realized that because we built in 2006 a rooftop sculpture garden on the building behind the museum. And we engaged a young San Francisco architect named Mark Jensen to design it for us. And a very young architect, wonderful young man, I think probably 40 years old. And what he gave us was the exact opposite of Mario Bota. Bota gave us, brick and strength and muscularity and power. And what Jensen gave us was light and air. If you know the Barcelona pavilion of Mies van der Rohe, it's all light and air and warmth and welcome. I mean, this man who we see here, if there's anything that characterizes this architecture, it's this man who's come, he's sitting in the sun, he feels welcomed, he's relaxing. We have a great coffee here, a great artisanal coffee called Blue Bottle, which has taken San Francisco by storm. And it says, come to the SFMOMA, we care about you. It says, we want you to stay, meet your friends, look at art, read a book, stay all day. We really want you here in our building. And so as we began our search for an architect, we really began to think about this. And we brought together a group of some of our leading trustees and key staff members and began to look at architects through websites and started with 35 or 40 firms and worked our way down to about 8. And we brought out those 8, got down to 4. And then we went on, we traveled and we went and visited buildings. We visited offices. We interviewed clients. We really did it was a kind of wonderful world tour looking at great contemporary architecture. And we came upon this firm called Snohetta. And it's not probably a firm that many of you will know. It's these two men named Craig Dykers, an American, and Kjetil Thorsen, who is Norwegian. And they came together in, I believe, 1989 on a kind of architectural blind date, if I could put it that way. They competed for this commission in Alexandria, Egypt, to design the so-called Great Library of Alexandria. It took them 10 years to get it built. I have to say, I want very much to see this building, but obviously it's not been the right time to go to Egypt. I'm looking forward to going to Alexandria. I do know that when all the trouble befell Egypt, or what should I say, the trouble, the marvelous things in some sense that have happened in Egypt, I have photographs that Craig and Kjetil have showed me of human chains being formed around this building. I think as an expression of the kind of love of the people of Alexandria for this building, and of course for the books that reside within. They've not yet finished a building in the United States, but they're very close to finishing one. This is the only building that will be on the World Trade Center site. It will actually open on the 11th anniversary of the bombing of the World Trade Center site. This is obviously the building here. It's a kind of welcome center and museum, just outside the waterfall that you see, of course. But this was the building that made all the difference for us. If you ever have a chance to go to Oslo, and I know it's, the opposite end of the world from here, this is a building you must see. It is, as you see, the National Opera and Ballet, and it's one of the more extraordinary buildings that I've ever seen certainly by contemporary architects. What I found so extraordinary about it was and we as a committee found, was that it's a beautiful building. It works very, very well. The acoustics are extraordinary. It functions fantastically. The back of house work is done perfectly. It's functions like a charm. But what really sold us was what you see in the picture here. This is how you come to the theater. That's the entrance where you see that gathering of people. But then what you see is people climbing up on top, walking all over the building, sitting out. I've been there in the winter, and you see people not there are so many sunny days in Oslo in the winter, but sunbathing actually out here. If you walk around the building, and this was a very important thing for us, if you walk around the building, and you can sort of go all the way around, there are windows where the staff is working, making the costumes and the wigs and the set designs for the opera and for the ballet. A wonderful kind of transparency, allowing not just for you, the visitor, to look in, and it sort of demystifies the work that the staff does, but it also allows the staff to look out. a kind of, I don't know, what should I say, a wonderful respect for the staff that works in the museum, which I think is not often the case in many museums that I know, certainly. So what happened was we made this great tour on three different occasions. On the last trip, the last day, we went to Oslo and had one of these aha moments. And these were the architects that we had to have, and we just knew. And there was no vote; it was unanimous, and it was done. And it's been just a wonderful working relationship with this young firm. They've never designed a large museum. They're both about 50 years old, so their firm is, well, it's large enough to take on a building like ours, or obviously a building like this, but they're not so large that we're going to be working with their third and fourth string assistants. It's not a big corporate architectural firm. So what I wanted to show you, and it's kind of sort of pertinent, I think. San Francisco, and I don't pretend to, I'm not going to try to talk this through in any kind of detail for those of you who don't know San Francisco at all, but here's the museum, and it faces out on this large street called 3rd Street, very heavily trafficked street. And one of the things we're very interested in is this, what's about to be built behind us, 2 blocks behind us, Transbay Terminal. This is going to be a sort of Grand Central Station for San Francisco. All the bus and train lines, the Muni lines will come into San Francisco and actually thrust the visitors to the city in our direction, directly down these 2 streets. And these 2 little streets called Minna and Natoma, which run right directly toward us, I gather that it's a characteristic of Melbourne that you have these wonderful little lanes where much of the cultural and social and the life of the city exists. And as I've walked at least minimally around the neighborhood of Acme, it struck me as very reminiscent of what we're looking at in San Francisco, where we really hope to, in a sense, not play to the big streets, not build another big building on the major thoroughfares of the city, but really activate and enliven these little tiny, they're not alleys, really they are lanes. And I think we have a great opportunity to do something in an urban planning sense that I think we're all very excited about. So here you see we're going to have not just one entrance, but actually this makes it look like there'll be 4 entrances. Actually, there'll be 3. So these are every time I show pictures of what Snowhead is designing. These are of course renderings. They're already immediately out of date, but this is give you a sense of how the new central gathering place for the museum will look. It's much larger than this, in fact. Hitting the wrong button. Instead of the brick facade of Mario Botta, we're going to have actually at the ground level at the second entrance to the museum, or the alternative entrance, I should say. There'll be 2 principal entrances. It will be glazed. It'll be a glass wall, and you'll be able to see in right away, and you'll know it's an art museum. And the Sarah that will open the museum with in that space will come down after a couple of years. It's not, and this is going to be a funny comparison to make, but we really have in mind over time, and the space is nowhere near as large as the Turbine Hall at Tate Modern, but we really do have a sense of it as our kind of smaller scale version of the Turbine Hall at the Tate, where the Tate every year commissions an artist to make a new piece, and it's free to the public to come in and experience. And this is our ambition for this space as we go forward. This is another view of that. Again, these are very, at this point, this is probably 6 or 9 months old, so it really doesn't look like this anymore, but the Sarah has now been replaced by 4 Ellsworth Kelly panels there on the left-hand side. This is a facade, and at this point I'm going to, I think, show you just a couple more slides, and then there's a quick film I'm going to show you just to conclude, which will give you a much better sense. I can talk about paintings, I think, reasonably well, but I'm speaking about architecture is not my strong suit. I'll let the images speak for themselves. It's a difficult site, I should say, before I show you the film. It's not very wide and rather long, and I could wish for a greenfield site where we could build a building that is maybe 2 or 3 stories high. But in fact, we have a building that's going to have 6 or 7 stories of galleries. It'll be I'm comforted by the fact that the Museum of Modern Art has 6 stories of galleries, so I feel that we can do it. It's about as tall as you would ever want a museum to be. But much of what you see there up at the top will be new offices for staff. And this is how it would look from the opposite side. And of course, this will change many times over. Now, I think this is where I love to turn the film on. It's just a short film that the architects made, just a couple of minutes long, and it'll give you a sense, it'll bring this, I think, all to life. So that's what I have for you. Come and visit us in San Francisco. Thank you so much.